Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody online. Nobody's watching it, but they hopefully will be tuning in because I just hit live. Before I start on what I wrote down tonight and going over, I wanted to read one of the lyrics of the songs I picked out. But then I also want to talk about why I picked the songs I did. When we started going through, and we started with songs about, when we're going through something, we're going to praise our way through it. And we go from glory to glory, which that's the song I want to read a lyric from, which I'll come back to that. Then at the very end, I chose two hymns that mean a lot to me, being raised in a situation where I was like being raised in a Pentecostal church and also going to a Baptist school. Hearing Holy, 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 and then Amazing Grace. I don't know if anybody else would say this, but I was sitting there and I could just feel a calmness come over the room. Mm-hmm. Because those are songs that are, they're safe. Everybody kind of feels like they know those songs, but also they're just songs that really bring peace into our lives. I remember when my oldest daughter was like 2.5 and we were at a house on Wideman'sville Road. Every night I had to rock her to sleep and literally hum or sing Amazing Grace for 30 minutes every night. Because she was never comfortable in that house. We never could figure out why. And then after we left, we were leaving and we found out that earlier in history in that house, 2 kids drowned in the bathtub upstairs right next to her room. Wow. And she was never comfortable in that house. But when I sang Amazing Grace or I hummed Amazing Grace, there was peace. And then we got to glory, and the reason I want to, we say we go from glory to glory to glory, and we'll never be the same. And when we get saved, we accept that. We accept that we're going to go from who we were to someone new, and we're going to never be the same. But then we stop. And we let God change us that one time. And then we don't let him change us anymore. And I can say that 100% because I went through this in the last couple of years. I want to talk about change tonight. And when we talk about change, I want to suggest something. We don't always know as much as we think we do. Sometimes we miss the obvious. If we go to John 3, Jesus reveals something that is quite essential to the truth of life. So much so that if you miss it, you miss everything. If you don't get this one right, we're never going to evolve or grow spiritually. Now, let me rephrase that. We will grow spiritually, but we won't grow in the way we're supposed to. There is something Jesus says we must do. Something we must do if we want to go to heaven. But also it says we must do if we want to have a fulfilling life. Something we must do is change and change for the good. We're going to read a whole thing about Nicodemus. Now everybody knows, or if you don't know, Nicodemus was the man of the time. He was teacher of Israel. We're going to get into that. He was wealthy, influential, and he was as known as Jesus was, really. He was honored, deeply religious, and yet incredibly empty inside. So hearing of the great truths that were taught and the miracles that he performed, Nicodemus wanted to actually get together and talk with Jesus. I want you to listen closely because this isn't a conversation between just 2 men. This isn't just Jesus and Nicodemus. This is a conversation that should apply to us because it's a conversation between God and man. Back in the day, if we were going to nominate someone, or even today, if we were going to nominate someone to represent all of humanity to God, say, hey, we're going to put this one person to talk to God, we would probably choose, back then, it would have been Nicodemus, or today, it would have been someone maybe with a different name, because Nicodemus isn't so well used, but it would have been someone a lot like Nicodemus. Highly intelligent, cultured, very moral, very good person. as close to being a good person as one could ever hope for without Christ. But there was still stuff missing in his life. Despite the fact that he was famous, a leader in his country, a leader in his faith, he was just like us a lot, dissatisfied with life, dissatisfied with what we had. The words Jesus gave to Nicodemus have unlocked the mystery of life to not just him, but to generations and through millions and millions of people through centuries. There's so much to unpack here, but let's go to John 3, verse 1. There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God. And that's a big deal to say that. And we'll dive into this, break it down. For no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him. Jesus answered and said to him, Most assuredly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Nicodemus said to him, How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born? AKA, he's not getting it. Jesus answered, Most assuredly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh and that is born of the Spirit is spirit. Do not marvel that I said to you, you must be born again. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but cannot tell where it comes from or where it goes. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit. Nicodemus answered and said to him, How can these things be? First off, this guy's highly intelligent, and he's still not getting it. He's the teacher of teachers back then, and he's still not understanding. But yet, he still asks questions. He still says, How can this be? Please explain this to me. I'm not going to just put rose-colored glasses on and see everything that you think I'm going to see. No, he asks questions. Jesus answered him, Are you the teacher of Israel and do not know these things? The idea here, first off, everybody uses this to talk about being born again, becoming a Christian. I want to push that aside. We're here. I've got to know most of you. Christians, yes. The idea here, though, is change. It's not just about becoming a Christian. That's definitely first and foremost, and I'm not discounting that, but I want to talk about change. Becoming something different than what we are presently are. What's going on here? Let's think about this from Nicodemus' view. Jesus saw in Nicodemus a man who was hungry for real truth. Nicodemus had everything. He was rich. Being the teacher of Israel had its perks. He was rich. He probably wore stuff that even nowadays would make our skin just, ooh, that's really nice. He had money. When he traveled, he didn't walk. When he traveled, he was carted places. But he was hungry for real truth. There's something missing in his life. And back in verse 1, and if we know this in Jesus' times, Nicodemus was a Pharisee. Now, when we often think about Pharisees, we think of negative things, because honestly, there's a lot that could be thought negative of Pharisees, because they did contribute to Jesus being crucified. They did be the opposition because they thought they knew more than Jesus. They thought they knew the Messiah would be this and not this. Being more concerned with the external than the internal. That's why Jesus called them whitewashed gravestones. Man, some of the insults back then, so much better than the insults nowadays. You brood of vipers, you whitewashed gravestones. Man, class insults. Class. Oh, man. The Pharisees were a select group. So just to give you a little background on them. They were a select group, never numbering more than 6,000. Each had taken a solemn vow before 3 witnesses that he would devote every moment of his entire life to obeying the 10 Commandments. That's more than we do. We say we're going to obey the Ten Commandments, but they literally strived for it. So yes, they had some issues. Don't get me wrong. But Nicodemus was a little different than most Pharisees also. Now, they may have taken that vow, and they may have never succeeded in that, but that's what they attempted to do. They took the law of God extremely seriously, like extremely seriously. Nicodemus was not only from this order, he was the primary leader of that region. We would consider Nicodemus not only very religious, but devout to his order of Pharisees and the laws of the Ten Commandments. Which means Nicodemus was probably the most popular and well-known teacher in all of Israel. Even though Nicodemus was well-known, highly educated, deeply religious, there was still something missing, which is why he even said, I want to meet with Jesus. The fact that the teacher of teachers was willing to meet with Jesus, even if he said, hey, I'm going to meet with him, but I need to meet with him at night. Because if he did it during the day, you want to talk about a stir, this would have caused.
Yeah, everybody.
There would have been massive. It would have been like the debate. Millions of people tuning in to see who's going to say what. But that's not why he wanted to meet with them. He met with them because he saw what he was doing. This is mentioned in Scripture not more than just once, so it's definitely worth noting. Perhaps he was afraid to be seen, because he was very well known, afraid of criticism of others, afraid of what others might think. Kind of like what we do. We spend way too much time thinking about what others think of us. And what this comes down to, even though he was willing to meet at night, it was time to start thinking for himself. It was time for him to push aside what all the Pharisees were saying and find out for himself what this really is about. That was what Nicodemus was doing. He was being careful, yes, coming at night, but at least he came. How many times do we not even go where we're supposed to go, do what we're supposed to do? He at least went. Yes, covered by night, but he still did it. Yet, at the end of Jesus' time, Nicodemus turned out to be one of the bravest followers of Christ. Keep in mind, everything there must be a beginning. Nicodemus' beginning with his walk with Christ was at night. It was secretive, and he was trying to figure out what it was. So it might be just a very meek beginning, but at the end, he stood there and he was brave. Some of us have a great beginning. Some of us get saved. Some of us get into spots in our lives where everything is great and grand at the beginning, but then we fall off at the end. Joseph of Arimathea took the body of Jesus away from the cross to bury it. And Nicodemus, who at first, again, it's going to say this, at first came to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds. And back then, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Though famous and admired, Nicodemus comes with the greatest respect for Jesus. In verse 2, he says, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God with them. Could you imagine the teacher of teachers, the one all known amongst Israel, goes to Jesus, who has no formal training? Right there, that should be something that we should be telling people nowadays. It's great to have training. It's great to go and learn biblical scholars and become well-known and become educated. But sometimes God uses people who don't have biblical training.
Considering Nicodemus would have known the Torah by heart.
Nicodemus did know the Torah by heart. He could requote it from front to end. Yep. I guarantee you he would walk into places that would ask him to read the Torah. And they would probably just say, well, tell me which one. And they would give him a scripture or a section to read, and he probably could speak it from heart. But in great nervous anticipation, I think about this. How many times if you're going to meet someone, or if you're going to go on a date, let's go, we're men, let's go on a date. How many times are you going to recite that date in your mind? Every word you want to say. Well, to Nicodemus, meeting Jesus and calling him rabbi was an amazing thing, because he thought about what to say. But that's how Nicodemus felt. Great respect for Jesus and his teachings. Maybe Jesus would say something that would bring a certain level of importance into his life, is what he was probably thinking. Because obviously he's searching for something. Jesus cut to the chase, though. Ever the revolutionary. He doesn't go into like, hey, how's it going? Biblically, he starts right then and there. You must be born again. Why did Jesus say that? Because he's not looking for admiration. He didn't care what Nicodemus thought of him. He didn't even care for the respect or anything. He's looking for followers. And Nicodemus was going to become one. He did not say, admire me. He said, follow me. Nicodemus was also getting quite elderly. And this is why I chose Nicodemus to talk about change tonight. Because I'm over 40. Some of us in this room are over 40, but we're not young anymore. We're not teenagers. We're not in our young, early 20s making dumb mistakes. We're all starting to get older. What was that?
Is that where we quit on the dumb mistakes, right around the top?
We start getting a little wiser, but we still make those dumb mistakes. And the reason I wanted to talk about Nicodemus was because he was quite elderly. He was older. How can a man be born when he is old? Can a man enter into his mother's womb and be born again? When you get older, we get set in our ways. I can't tell you how set in my ways I was until probably about a year and a half ago. When we are young, we want to go on the fastest, most radical ride in the park. We want to go. When we get older, we don't care about the rides in the park. We want to go, what's the best place to eat?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
When we're young, we want to run to the next thing. If you're at an amusement park, you go from ride to ride to ride. When you're older, you're like, I need a bench. I'm dizzy.
You're on that slow water ride.
When you're young, you look for an exciting night. When we start getting older, we're looking forward to a dull evening. We're looking forward to just relaxing. You sit down in a rocking chair so we can get it started some nights. I can't tell you how many times my mind has made a commitment that my body can't keep. And now I'm getting older, I'm starting to realize that my mind needs to stop making those commitments. Everything hurts sometimes. And when it doesn't hurt, it's probably not working. You know, oh, my knee doesn't hurt. Well, that's because my knee doesn't bend anymore. You know, those are the things we start dealing when we get old. Right now, this one's going to make a lot of sense. We start dimming the lights for economic reasons, not romantic reasons.
One light on.
We've owned clothes so long that they've come back in style, not once, but twice. Man, my 90s clothes are looking pretty good right now. I look at dropping my daughter off at school, I'm like, I wore those same jeans in 99. It's insane what's coming back into style. We also know when we're getting old, when we get into the elevator and we're starting to sing with the music because it was our music. And finally, you know when you're getting old, when we stop trying to hold our stomach in, no matter who walks in the room. We're just like, it is what it is. Nicodemus was getting old. There wasn't much time left for him. And Jesus cuts to the chase and tells old Nicodemus what he needs to know. Nicodemus, I'm about to reveal to you a fundamental reality of life. Listen very carefully. You must be born again. This is not optional, it's essential. Now today when people say born again, we have no idea what they actually mean about it when someone says that nowadays. Because people use that term so loosely. But Jesus is helping us to see what it means. It's not about anything but a spiritual rebirth. Your religious beliefs are not enough. Being set in your ways. Just because you got saved once is not enough. Where do you stand? Are you growing? Are you changing? Are you following what God has laid out for you? You know, there's so many things Nicodemus is going through his mind. But how can such a thing happen to a man in my state at my age? Is it really possible to change? Because that's what it is. It's about change. To start over, to be born from above. Can a man really change? How many times have we tried to change ourselves? I asked myself that question. I'm like, this week? Today?
You talking about last?
In the last 30 minutes while we were having conversation between songs, there was so much we were talking about that was hitting our spirits. Several of us were tearing up because we were talking about our families. We make endless resolutions to lose weight, get in shape, exercise more, watch less TV, read the Bible more. We try new clothes, new jobs, new environments. You can repaint a car, but it's still the same car. Verse 9, Nicodemus asked him, how can these things be? Because Nicodemus is speaking honestly because he doesn't understand. What's the purpose of this? Things we ask ourselves. How does one really change? How does one openly apply this to our lives? Nicodemus, I'm an old man set in my ways. I can't be born again. Jesus shoots back. Are you not the teacher of Israel? And do you not know these things? Talk about just getting straight to it. Why Nicodemus, you famous, well-respected, well-studied teacher, you don't understand me? Just like Nicodemus, there are many people today who can't understand change. I know I couldn't. I was doing the same thing over and over and over for 14 years, 13 years. Thinking it was just enough. Thank God for His grace and His mercy that brought me and my family through these things. But just doing the same thing wasn't enough. I had to change. So many of us don't understand it. A relationship with the Lord, a friendship with God, apparently his religion has not prepared him for this, so he needed change. He needed the one who brings the change. And I question right now, just because we got saved once, are we willing to let God change us again? Change needs to be part of our daily routine, not our, for a lack of better words, when crap hits the fan, and now I have to change.
Well, if you've been saved once and you don't actually change, then you're right like Jesus was saying, and then the dog turns again to his own vomit, and
Absolutely.
the pig goes right back to this. And then what has changed?
Mm-hmm.
What was the word?
Absolutely. He needed the one who brings change. I tend to not look at this as a salvation message because I am saved. So I look at this message and I say, I need to apply this message not just as a salvation message, as a message for me to be okay with change. No matter what my age. No matter what my age. Just because I'm 41 and I've served and I've done so many different things and I've been part of churches who have done great things and they're wonderful places. Just because I've served and served and served and served doesn't mean I was doing what was right. God had to change me.
It is an everyday thing.
Yes, it's a salvation message at face value, but also a lesson if we are born again and we are getting older. We need to be open to change, to accept that God's ways are different than our human ways. A spiritual rebirth is paramount for salvation, but isn't it something we need to do daily? As men, we fear the unknown that change brings. We talked about this last week, and I was writing this sermon, and we talked about how it's the fear of the unknown. The fear of what change brings that we don't understand is why we don't like change. I learned this massively over the last few years, and I guarantee all of us have learned this at one point in time of our life. My marriage changed, but God walked me through it with my wife. Maybe it's time to change jobs. God will walk you through it. But this section is where we started talking earlier tonight, which is why I wrote this. And I did not, this is typed up, and I didn't do it. And I didn't do it today, but when we were talking earlier tonight, we were talking about reprioritizing our lives. Just because someone asks us to do something doesn't mean we're supposed to. So number one, God first. Matthew 6:33. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. As men, God has to come first over everything else. And this is hard for me because I love my family. I love my wife. My wife is the most important thing on this world to me, on this earth. But God has to come first. One thing I want to stress is a relationship with God doesn't mean serving or volunteering. It means time with the Father, whether that's prayer, worship, meditation on his word. Whatever way you connect with God, you need to do it. Be still and know. We were talking about that earlier.
That's still
that's
my life verse right there.
I read the Bible and I struggle meditating on it. Worship is how I connect. Prayer, probably second. Devin might do something different. Jason might do something different. I don't care which way you connect with God. Connect with him daily. At our church, the biggest thing we talk about is daily encounters. Spend time with God daily. If you aren't doing that, you're not going to be open to change. And then you also won't know what he wants to change. Number two, your family. So after God comes your family. When it comes to the house, we need to remember this. Our spouse comes before our kids. We chose to marry our wives for a reason. We might struggle remembering those reasons sometimes, and our marriages change. Dave's laughing because we have some great conversations about our marriages and our wives and how amazing they are, but sometimes we just don't understand. But we need to understand that as we change, our spouse will change too. So we have to grow together, making time to spend together. Not having every second of the day that you're home be wrapped up with the children. A healthy marriage has to be first, or else our raising kids, you'll be doing it separately.
Yeah.
As I get older, now I have a soon-to-be 17-year-old, a 13-year-old, and an 11-year-old. I realize that it's going to be just me and my wife one day. I better make sure to build our relationship first. Then we together will train and raise our kids. Remember the word train. It's not just about making sure, I raised my kids and they're adults and they didn't die. No, you need to train them. Third, and honestly after that, is responsibilities. Work. Yes, work would be third. Responsibilities, taking care of your children, providing, then volunteering. God will give us plenty of stuff to do, but so will the enemy. He will give us plenty to do to keep our focus off. Because if we're not healthy at home, he doesn't care if you're serving at church 5 nights a week. That's great. The enemy's like, oh, he's serving 5 nights a week at church, but his house is falling apart. He's getting what he wants. You don't understand that the enemy will literally put things in your path to take time away from your wife and children, to take time away from your daily encounters with God. He wants you busy because then you're not focused on the things that are supposed to be first.
Amen.
You're just busy.
Yeah.
I did this. And it's nobody else's fault but mine.
I've been there.
We had this conversation,
I'm
and
there
some
now.
of the best conversations I've had since starting Main Point with Floyd and everybody, and Frank, have been about where are our priorities. And that Satan will give us good things to do to keep us busy. And it's nobody else's fault. It's not the church's fault. It's not the pastor's fault. It's not the person running the ministry. It's our fault for not saying, no, I need family time. I need time with God. My relationship's struggling with my wife. I need to say no so I can repair my relationship with my wife. I'm not walking as close as I should be with the Father, so I need to reprioritize and say no sometimes. But we want to help everybody because as Christians, we're supposed to be helpful. And that's great. And we're trying to love everybody and be helpful and lead people to Christ. But the enemy knows that. And he knows that's a weak spot in people in the church because we want to help. We want to be like Christ. But we have to have our priorities right. We have to change the culture. We have to change ourselves. We have to change what's inside of us. It's got to be God, then our family, which includes spouse first, then our children. Then we have to have our responsibilities. You can't take care of your wife and kids if you're not having your responsibilities met at home, at work. Then we gotta, if God gives us opportunities to serve, absolutely. We have to take care of our household. We have to take care of ourselves. Remember, we can't take anything with us when we die. I'm going to go to heaven and I'm going to go up there just as I came into this world, probably with a new robe on, but that's about it. I'm going to walk up there and God's going to put a robe on me. Hopefully it's before I get up there, but I'm going to be butt naked with no clothes I had on when I'm put in the grave. I can't take anything with me, but I can make sure when I get there, my children meet me there. When it's their time. This is why we have to change. For our children and our families. First Timothy 3:5, for if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? I say that because I love serving. I love serving on Friday nights. I love serving on Sunday nights for Bible study with my wife. I love serving for 15 years at the church we used to be at. But I didn't manage my household right. So how can I care for his church first? No, that's not right. I got to care for my responsibilities in my household first. Then I can serve when I can. Not every night, not every day, when I can. I sat in, for years, I did not sit in a pew with my wife because we were both too busy. For years. There was probably 2 or 3 years, I don't think we sat in a pew, but maybe for 10 minutes during a service before one of us had to go do something. That's my fault. I look back at it and a lot of the things we went through, nobody's fault but my own. Nobody's fault for asking me because I was willing, because I did not have my priorities straight. The lesson with Nicodemus shows us that no matter how much we grow and how much we get older, our number one priority is we need to get closer to Jesus and allow him to change our lives. We need to stop fighting change. Boy, is that hard. We'll accept change, but only after we fought it tooth and nail, and when there's no other option. Just gotta let that sit for a second. If we spent time on the easy things to change right now in our lives, and accept change with open arms in Jesus, making sure that the things we're accepting in our lives are from God, because just because change is happening doesn't mean it's from God. If we spent the time on the easy things to change, mainly our priorities, our lives would be completely different, and our children's lives would be completely different, and our marriages would be completely different. I still have a ton of work to do in everything I've done to change, to become a better husband, to become a better father, to become a better son to the Father. And it's not easy. My priorities are screwed up. Nobody else's fault but mine. And that's the number one thing you got to realize. Take responsibility that this is our fault. We got our responsibilities screwed up. Now what are we going to do about it? The church hasn't done a good job preaching that. The American church has so much going on in it. They're growing so quickly, or this is happening, that's happening, and they need help. I get it. And we want to be there to help. But just because you're there helping doesn't mean you're healthy. What are you going to sacrifice? What are you going to sacrifice? I'm not going to sacrifice my marriage. I'm not going to sacrifice my relationship with God. I'm not going to sacrifice my relationship with my kids. Because when I die, they're the only things that matter. So as we grow, as we change, how are we going to do it? Groups like this is how we do it. We do it together. Conversations with Dave in the parking lot after hours. We end at 9 o'clock most nights. I've been here till 10:30, 11 o'clock talking to Dave with Floyd and Frank.
So now we can't do that.
Can't do that tonight because I got a campsite set up after we're done, but
We got you.
conversations and being open and honest in a group setting like this where we can talk about things. And I'm standing up here admitting my faults because I've done it. I've screwed up. I put things in the wrong order. You know, before we close tonight and everybody leaves, and I'm going to get off the computer first before we do this, I want to take some time, and I want to pray with anybody, and we're going to pray together. If we need to get things straight in our lives, in our households, I want to pray with you. Because it's painful. It's painful to admit that things aren't right in your household because of you. We're the men. It's our responsibility to lead our households, not our wives. Definitely not our children. God, no. I love my kids, but gosh, woo, that would be a mess if I let my kids run the household. Because they don't know yet. I've trained them, but I'm not done training them. We need to spend some time in prayer together, holding each other up, leading each other, pointing us in the right direction. Before we do that, though, everybody online, 6:30 next week, we have food here. I don't know who's speaking next week. Do you know?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Someone will be speaking.
Yeah.
If not, I'll speak again. That's great. I got another sermon I wrote for tonight that God said, not now. Maybe it's next week. I don't know. If I pulled up my phone, I could probably see who it is. Frank will put it in the comments. 6:30 food, 7 o'clock worship, 8 o'clock word. No, we're going to get together tonight after I click end and shut the laptop off. We're going to pray. And if it's just a prayer of dismissal, that's great. If not, and we're going to dive in and hold each other up and hold each other accountable, that's even better.